Juan Fernando Hermosa Suárez grew up in Ecuador looking, at first glance, like any other slight, quiet teenager. But by the time he was 15, the country would know him by another name, El Niño del Terror, the Child of Terror, the youngest serial killer in Ecuador's history. In a span of just a few months between late 1991 and early 1992, a wave of shootings tore through Quito. Taxi drivers were gunned down at the wheel. Gay men were lured and murdered. Panic set in. Night workers avoided the northern avenues. Cabbies warned each other over radios and refused certain fares after dark. And at the center of that fear was a boy with a 9mm pistol and a growing reputation for cold, mechanical violence. He had been adopted as an infant and raised in a busy neighborhood in the north of Quito. His adoptive mother was deaf and often alone with him. His father worked out of town in Sucumbios. By 15, Hermosa drifted toward the La Moraine arcade scene and the nightlife around the Punta Alhambra, posturing as just another skinny kid with big eyes and a hard stare. Behind that mask, he was assembling a crew of other teens and arming himself with the 9mm that, investigators later said, he had obtained through a security guard. The murders began on November 22nd, 1991. After leaving a disco with friends, Hermosa climbed into a San Remo taxi near Avenida 10 de Agosto. Mid-ride, he drew the pistol and put a round through the driver's head. One friend slid behind the wheel, drove the cab out toward the Val de los Chilos, and dumped the body by a rural track. A week later, Hermosa and members of his group went to the home of Charlie, a well-known trans hairdresser who had just had a stroke of luck with the lottery. There was drinking, then an argument, and 5 rapid shots from the same 9mm ended Charlie's life. These early killings set a pattern. Fast, close, and executed with the same handgun. Through late 1991 and into the first week of January 1992, the shootings piled up. According to contemporaneous reporting later summarized by El Telegrafo, Hermosa was responsible for at least 22 murders in roughly 4 months, 8 taxi drivers, 10 gay men, a truck driver and his assistant, and 2 other victims. Some sources place the count at 23, reflecting how chaotic the investigation became as bodies and ballistic links were tallied after his arrest. Either way, the scale and speed were unprecedented for a killer that young, and the city's fear was obvious. Weekend nights were the most dangerous hours. Quito police formed a dedicated squad under Major Fausto Terran and, following a break with a group of juvenile thieves downtown, traced the trail to Hermosa's address near the intersection of America and De Guia. In the pre-dawn of January 9th, 1992, officers climbed through a skylight into the wrong room. Startled awake in his mother's bedroom, Hermosa opened fire at close range with the 9mm. Grenades thrown by police outside blew in a wall and injured officers. Within minutes, a shootout raged through the small home. Hermosa's adoptive mother, Amada Suárez, was fatally shot during the operation. The teenager was captured minutes later, trying to flee through the back, uninjured and defiant. My name is Juan Fernando Hermosa Suárez, and I turned 16 on February 28th. Years later, investigative reporting would question whether the tactics used that night constituted an extrajudicial execution in Suárez's death. A controversy that never fully faded. Once in custody, Hermosa confessed broadly and was sentenced under Ecuador's juvenile code to the maximum penalty for a minor, 4 years at the Virgilio Guerrero Rehabilitation Center. Inside, the Child of Terror quickly became a prison leader. 16 months into the term, he engineered an escape. His girlfriend smuggled in a handgun. In the breakout, a police corporal, Naphtali Salema, was shot 5 times and killed as he tried to stop the fleeing youths. Hermosa slipped across the border to Colombia, where he was eventually picked up, returned, and held until his term ended. The sentence, just 4 years for a confessed multi-homicide spree, would ignite public debate in Ecuador about juvenile penalties and public safety. Freedom did not last. Released in January 1996, Hermosa moved to Nueva Loya, Lago Agrio, and Secambios to live with his father. He was seen in local clubs and bars around La Joya and Nueva Loya in the weeks that followed. Then, on his 20th birthday, February 28, 1996, farm workers found a body on the banks of the Agarico River. The young man's face was unrecognizable, caved in, slashed by machete and shot. His hands were tied behind his back with wire. Identification came from papers in a wallet. Juan Fernando Hermosa, the Niño del Terror. Police said 5 hooded men were believed to be responsible. The signs pointed to a personal vendetta, not a robbery. There was no trial, no claimed responsibility. The country closed the file on its youngest serial killer in a scene as violent as the crimes that had made him infamous. The aftermath was messy and raw. To some, his death looked like street justice. A system that released a teenage mass killer after 4 years was corrected by vigilantes with guns and machetes. To others, it underscored the state as failures twice over. First, in allowing a boy to become a killer. Second, in an error-ridden raid that left his mother dead. And finally, in releasing a notorious offender without a plan for true reintegration or protection. The questions lingered long after the body was buried. How does a 15-year-old become capable of that much bloodshed that quickly? And what breaks in a city when a child becomes its predator? Behind the sensational nickname was a pattern investigators could chart: a small, same-age crew, late-night attacks, a single handgun, short confrontations, and weekend clustering. The victim groups tell another story about vulnerability in early 90s Quito: taxi drivers alone in the dark with cash and keys. Queer men targeted when prejudice made them easier to isolate and less likely to be believed or protected. But those choices weren't random. They exploited the city's blind spots. When the spree ended, a documentary and a generation of reporting would revisit the case, not just for its brutality, but for what it revealed about fear policing and how the media built a monster out of a boy who had already made himself into one. In the end, almost everyone lost. Families of at least 22 people got no real justice beyond a confession and a juvenile sentence. The officer killed in the escape never saw a trial for his shooter, and Hermosa's father identified his son by papers, not by face. The hard details remain: at least 22 murders in roughly 4 months. Arrest at 16 after a chaotic raid, 4-year juvenile sentence, a deadly escape, release, a birthday execution on a jungle riverbank. The legend of El Niño del Terror persists because it is a perfect storm of horror, youth, speed, volume, and the uneasy feeling that the city itself helped create him and then couldn't decide how to deal with him once it did.